direction you're looking. There's at the very top, and this hole had 18 inches of water in it this morning. Plastic down. I had to pump it all out, and then I recleaned that part of the profile. I didn't reclean this part, but it still looks pretty good. But this uppermost kind of dark soil, this is a humus. This is decayed plant matter and just kind of gradual soil development. Below that, for about 30 to 40 centimeters, it's a fairly homogeneous zone that we interpret as a plow zone, plowed soil. This bottom, in at least the map of 1909 of this, marks it as cultivated. So this is an agricultural field. Then beneath that are deposits of sand. You know, some are coarse, finer sands. There's some thin zones of clay. These are, we think, due to flooding episodes. And within those flood deposits, we found some artifacts, some kind of late artifacts, but also some earlier artifacts, some pottery that looks like it dates before 1400. Then, once you get down to the very dark soil at the bottom, that also has very late material. So, and a Paleo-age. And the upper part of that is kind of a sandy soil, and once you get down to the floor of this, it's much clayier. In fact, we see a very similar profile in terms of just the lowermost deposits at the wall site at Hillsborough, where you have this living surface, and then the organics gradually kind of filter down into the clay below. So in terms of artifact content, you'll find artifacts in the very top, and it stays dark and then gradually gets lighter, but it's just the organics that have kind of leached down into the lower soils. This is kind of a silt loam. There's some coarse sand right in here. This is all coarse, unsorted sand. This is flood deposit. And in some of the other units, we actually had pockets of pebbles and stuff. So you imagine just a turbulent kind of velocity of the water transporting a load, and then it's being trapped in these pockets and then covered with other sediment. This you can actually hear. Just listen. Okay. You just hear the coarseness of that. It's much finer sediment. Has more clay in it. Silt there, and then you get down here. You see this kind of truncated here. You have a very sharp break, and then below that there's more kind of gradual change. Within this, you get, it's kind of an upper part is kind of mottled, and this is where a lot of the artifacts were coming out of. And then you get into this more homogeneous kind of dark clay zone, and once you get into the top of that, you very quickly quit finding artifacts. So you have this dark soil that probably it predates the habitation, and at that level, what we would expect is that if there's cultural material further down, it would be in post holes or pits that were dug down into the ground surface.
So could you recover evidence that the Native American communities had agriculture through the soil profiles?
Not through the soil profiles, but I think that's one reason why they're living here, is that these are fairly rich agricultural soils. At this time period, everybody was growing corn, beans, and squash. Zone. And we think that this is closer to the surface that the folks were living on in 1700. Now further up you get both stuff that's contemporary and also material that looks earlier. And so like why should the earlier stuff be above the later stuff? Well, it's flood deposit. It's been redeposited from somewhere else. So that's why we didn't, as our shovel testing, we only got over a little bit before we discovered this and then focused on it. But we have students today out digging lines of shovel tests further upstream, and we suspect that this material that's in the flood deposits is probably being transported from some location further upstream. And even with this dark soil, you know, in terms of the density of artifacts, we may be kind of off the habitation area here, but very close by to where you're seeing just discarded refuse and stuff, but not actually where there might be post holes or other evidence of houses.
So is it typical for the organic material to percolate downward? And then is it because of the clay or what? Because you usually think of the organic material higher up in the soil profile.
Well, it is, but it just kind of leaches down. For example, you know, what this kind of reminds me of is at the wall site, it was a palisaded community from the 16th century, and at the northern edge of the village, the land surface drops down a little bit. And that area was filled in with refuse. In fact, you have a midden that was preserved, that got lots of fragments, animal bone, broken pottery fragments, just lots of stuff. But once you get through that upper part of the midden, then the soil stays dark, but the artifacts very quickly decline in density until you're just digging dark soil and there's nothing in it. And I think it's you know, it may be kind of like that kind of naturally, but I think it's enhanced there because you have such rich organics above that you kind of reach down into the lower soil above.
That's a great question. Why I approached you when I learned about all the things you're doing out here. That pedology has a lot to contribute to archaeology. We rarely talk together, but your question is a pedologist question.
And I'm not a pedologist.
Well, you're doing the best you can, like we all do, to try to understand it. But what's so fascinating here to me is just the striking nature of that lower layer and its abrupt boundary. Steve's reminded me that could have been scoured too, but when we have tried to study these near Fort Mill, in fact, in all those places in South Carolina you're talking about, about half the time that we're on a floodplain, you'll be able to find the former surface, or the Paleo A. And what we've just been really amazed at is that every single floodplain, almost, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but every single floodplain is not unlike this in the Piedmont, that you have 1 meter, you can have 5 meters of legacy sediment from the European African history, the late, that part of the history, because of the erosion from the uplands.
So that dark layer was originally the organic surface layer, and that just has a whole lot of sedimentation on top of it. Is that what you're saying?
There, in brief, yes.
Yeah, and also the fact that it's dark by itself, that, you know, I've been fooled a lot of times where we find this, there's a cultural deposit there, but it's not. But, you know, in this case, there is material on the top suggesting that that's a remnant of stable surface that was occupied.
Something I appreciated that you said the other day, Dan, was just thinking about, because there is evidence that there are cultural artifacts in that layer, you can really imagine people walking on that surface, which I appreciated you saying. So at one point people's feet were touching that ground, and now it's just buried below that flood sedimentation, like you said.
Yeah, and once we get just into this stuff just a little bit, we quit finding artifacts.